Hey guys, TRScientist here, and today I am back with episode number 9 of r/Nuclear Revenge, where today it's all animals. You shouldn't mess with animals, and you're gonna find out why you shouldn't today with these 3 stories. That's right, 3 stories: a duck, an ant, and an ant farmer, and a cat. Let's go. Creep kills my duck, so I ruin his life. So here's my story. Back in May of 1990, there was an unreasonably late snowstorm. A few days later, it snowed. I was riding my bike and found a baby duckling all by itself near a river. There was no mother duck around, so I put it inside my shirt to keep it warm and brought it home on my bike. My mother thought it would die because it was so small and cold and wet and shivering. But I put it under a light, and after a while it dried off and started hopping around and peeping. It was so cute. It followed me like a puppy. I called it Philip because it sounded like I was saying Philip, Philip, Philip whenever it peeped. So after a few weeks, I figured I ought to teach it to swim and eat stuff in the lakes. So I started bringing it to a small local beach. Philip did well. He swam around and ate reeds and snails, and everyone at the beach loved him. Now my trouble started. After I brought Philip to the beach several times, the lifeguard told me that his boss, the director of Parks and Recreation, who will be known as Stuffed Shirt, had told him that there was a city ordinance against bringing pets to city parks. I tried to explain to the lifeguard that it was only for a few weeks, and then the duck would be grown up and be able to live on its own, but he didn't care. I was upset. How was I going to teach the duck to live on its own? I went to the library and got out the large blue books of city ordinances and looked up the relative ordinance, and discovered something interesting. There was one ordinance that prohibited bringing dogs into city parks, and another then prohibited bringing horses into city parks, both of which I see happening fairly often, by the way. But no ordinance against bringing ducks into city parks. So I went home and called Stuffed Shirt. However, it being a weekend, he wasn't in, so his secretary answered the phone. I told her what had happened and what the ordinance actually said, and told her to tell Stuffed Shirt that I'd be bringing my duck to the beach anytime I felt like it. Well, apparently when Stuffed Shirt heard this, his head exploded. He called me back and told me that he had a conference with the city attorney about my duck. And according to him, the city attorney had decided that the law should be interpreted to refer to all domestic or pet animals, not merely horses or dogs. Then he said he had called the DNR because I was not supposed to have a duck. Now, please note the following at this point. Attorneys are not privileged to interpret the law. Only judges are supposed to do that. And the law was not ambiguous such that it required interpretation. One specifically said dogs, the other said horses. Note, at this point, my duck was referred to as a domestic animal. Anyway, a few days later, the DNR agent shows up at my house and marches right into my backyard without ringing the doorbell and without a warrant. We'll call him Butt Buddy because I suspected that his relation to Stuffed Shirt, as he wasn't even from my city, Stuffed Shirt had gotten him to come over from another city. I was in my backyard at the time feeding Philip, my duck, and Butt Buddy proceeds to read me the riot act. First, he tells me that my duck was a wood duck, which is a wild animal, after Stuffed Shirt had previously referred to it as a domestic animal. And this was a lie, by the way. I learnt later my duck was a mallard, which can be considered either wild or domestic, depending on the circumstances. Then he tells me that I can't have a wood duck, which my duck wasn't, without a game farm license. And I couldn't get a game farm license unless I had 40 acres of land. He then told me I either had to let my duck go by the end of the day, or he would confiscate it and take it to a lake in another town, where I would never see it again.
I told him my duck was too little to let go, and I was going to let it go in a month, but he wouldn't hear it. He told me I had to do as I told him. I was crying as I let my poor little duckling Philip go on the lake. I went back that evening to check on him, and he was cowering, terrified, under a boardwalk. The next day I couldn't find him at all. He probably got eaten by something that was because he was way too little to let go. Then, would you believe, the next week, Bud Buddy, the game warden, came back into my property without permission again to make sure the duck was still not there. Now, onto the revenge part. After losing my duck, I went to the library and spent hours looking up the laws about wildlife and game farms. I found out something very interesting. But Buddy, the game warden, had lied to me. As it turned out, you only needed 40 acres of land to get a game farm license on land where hunting, trapping, or killing of animals was going on. Otherwise, there was no land requirement to get a game farm license, only a pen size requirement, which my pen for my duckling more than met. If I was devastated and crying my eyes out before, now I was furious that my head was exploding. They killed my duck, not because it was the law, but just for an ego trip. So I got even. I was the town eccentric, so I didn't lose I didn't have any reputation to lose, and didn't care what people thought of me. I spent the next several weeks walking around downtown and telling everyone who would stop and listen about my duck and how Stuffed Shirt and Butt Buddy had lied to me and made me condemn my own pet to death. Maybe people thought I was nuts, but I didn't care. Everyone was finding out what happened. And Stuffed Shirt was scared. I had a friend from work who also worked part-time in his office, and she told me he was so frightened that he had gone to a lawyer to try to pursue a slander charge against me to get me to stop telling people what had happened. Only the lawyer told him there was absolutely nothing that could be done, because truth was an absolute defense against slander. And if he didn't like the truth, whose fault was that? Stuffed Shirt's critical mistake, of course, was actually filing a complaint with the DNR so that he could get Butt Buddy Game Warden to legitimately intimidate me into releasing my baby duckling way too soon. The DNR, like all government agencies, keeps records. If he tried to claim I was lying and slandering him, there was documented proof of what had happened. So the outcome? Stuffed Shirt lost his cushy city bureaucrat job as the director of Parks and Recreation, and the last I heard of him, about 10 years after this happened, he had lost 2 other jobs. His house, he couldn't make the payments when he had no job. His wife, he didn't want to stick around when he had no job, and was somewhere in the trailer park, drinking himself to death. I hope he did too. Don't fuck with a duck. Yeah, I swore that one time for the sake of a rhyming joke. Don't fuck with a duck. From ducks to ants. You shouldn't mess with an ant farmer. Some backstory. When I was about 11 or 12, I started to get hobbies, which included rock collecting and ant farming. Important later. I also started babysitting my brother at the time. So, it was a normal Saturday that consisted of me babysitting my little brother, taking care of my ants. I let my brother play on my PS3 until my doorbell rang. I opened it and saw these annoying little kids that always asked if I could play, but every time I would say no. Normally they would just leave, but this time they just sat there and kept on ringing the doorbell. It went on for 10 minutes until it stopped. I thought it was over until I heard them start giggling, and they started throwing rocks at my house and even cracked one of the windows. I opened the door and they just knew it wasn't going to be good. Also, at the time, I was probably about 5'9", so I was kind of scary. I walked outside and told them to go home or I'll call the police. Fast forward about 2 weeks and it happened 3 more times. 3 more times. At this point, I was done playing around. I knew they were going to do it again, so at the side of my house, they were getting the rocks. I had accidentally spilt my fire engine with probably about 1,500 to 2,000 fire ants on the rocks. So the next day comes around, the little brats were ringing my doorbell, and I could almost taste sweet, sweet revenge. After the ring stopped, I heard the thuds of the rocks hitting my house. All of a sudden, it stopped, and I could hear them start to cry. I looked out the window, and the little boy was sitting right on the rocks. They all ran home. Oh, but it's not over. Their mum came out of the house and over to mine, and I put it on my sad face and told the mum they broke my ant farm after the mum gave me $10 and I never saw them again. I almost started to feel bad, but they shouldn't have messed with my rocks. Oh, they were grabbing your rock collection and throwing it. Oh. A few weeks later, they started doing things like taking toys from my backyard, ringing our doorbell, and stealing our rocks. I told my parents, but they kept on doing it even after the fire ants, and this time I was so mad I didn't hold back. I took one of my book bags and filled it with Legos, balls, dolls, etc. But that wasn't it. I had one of my subterranean termite farms and emptied it into the bag. I gently put my book bag in the grass and waited. I went to feed my brother lunch, and when I came back, it was gone. Fast forward a couple of months, and their house was on quarantine for the bug infestation. Cover is a beach. I also wasted almost $500 worth of bugs. But you ruined the whole house with termites. Like, well, they sort of should have seen it coming. I'm glad you had a termite one ready to go. This is like, you want to mess with me? Here's a fucking bunch of termites for you. And again, I am back to swearing. I am trying not to swear. The only one I've said multiple times is the F word. From ants to cats now. Bratty Kid hurts my cat until she fights back. For a quick background, I babysit in my home, sometimes as a side job. I have 2 cats and 1 dog. One of my cats is a super sweet tuxedo cat named Bella, and she works as my personal therapy animal. She would rather run away than confront someone. So not a lot of people who know her often expect her to be capable of exploding into a hellish raid. One kid had to find out the hard way, and as far as I know, he had been respectful of kids ever since then. This kid, who we'll call SB, a spoiled brat, really lives up to his nickname. He was probably one of the worst kids I've had to deal with. Yeah. I'm usually pretty relaxed when it comes to babysitting. He was always stealing things, making messes, and throwing tantrums over literally nothing. I'm pretty sure he has some kind of mental disability, but since he was only 6 at the time, I never wanted to voice my concerns. But out of all the things this boy did whenever he stayed with me, the one thing he knew could push my buttons was hurting my animals. He would pull my cat's tails and ears, kick them, chase them, and I caught him throwing rocks at them more than once. And my poor dog, who had a part-time job visiting kids in hospital, had to deal with this little terror too. Because of his treading, when he got tired of the kid, he just left the house and disappeared up in the woods until he heard the kid's parents arrive and take him away. I felt so bad for Duke, my dog, that I ended up teaching him the time to go phrase, which is code for SB is here, so you better go before he sees you. And I would even leave the shed door open so Duke had a place with water and a bed until the kid left. I had spoken to the parents many times about SB's behaviour and how it's unacceptable in my house, and if it continued, I would raise my rate, which was already low to begin with, in order to pay for damages and possibly even vet bills. The parents said they would work on this with SB, but every time he came back, there was no obvious progress. One day I had settled SB in for his nap and was working on online certification class when I heard him get up to use the bathroom. At first I thought nothing of it, since that was normally part of his routine. But what happened 5 minutes later scared the daylights out of me. I hear an ungodly howl from the bathroom, and I'm still not sure if it was Bella or SB that made it. But SB comes running to me. His hands, chest, face, and even his back are scratched and bloody. And Bella comes after him, snarling and spitting in a crazed rage. Her entire body is soaked right up to her ears. Her eyes are the size of saucers, and her nose and one of her paws is actually bleeding. I quickly usher Bella into my room, where she takes refuge under my bed. I call my vet and say I have an animal emergency, but I can't take her on the half-mile drive to his office. Luckily, he says he can send his assistant, and I hang up and deal with SB's wounds. Of course, SB is wailing and screaming and in a great deal of pain, and I'm doing my best to stay calm and not jump to conclusions, but it's rather difficult not to after how abusive he's been. I just remind myself to tend to his wounds first before I find out what happened, and do my best to stay composed. I'm going to explain really quick that I do have a camera system in my garage where the bathroom is located. From where the camera is, you can see into the bathroom, but you can't see the toilet, so a child can use the bathroom in privacy. My doors have locks, so whenever I babysit, the door is rigged to stay open to prevent a child from locking him or herself inside and potentially hurting themselves or causing damage. The camera was actually originally intended to catch any burglars that came into my garage, but it came in handy in this situation as well. At first, I didn't think about my hidden camera. I made sure SB was on the couch resting, his wounds dressed, and a glass of milk with painkillers on the table for him. And then I went to the bathroom. The sight that greeted me was even more shocking than SB's wounds and Bella's rage. There was fur all over the bathroom, bloody paw prints on the wall, and blood on the floor too. As I stepped through all of this to the sink, I nearly went into a fury myself. The sink, which is about a foot and a half deep and about 2 feet wide, designed for shops, was almost completely full of steaming hot water, so it actually burnt my water. So hot it actually burnt my finger when I tested it, and it had cat fur and blood in it, as well as a pair of scissors. I was horrified. I'm not sure what SB was trying to do to my cat, but it was then I remembered my hidden camera, and I rushed to get the footage. As I watched, I became so angry I was tempted to walk out and bend SB over my knee myself. In fact, I wish I could slap that kid silly. But I knew this would be better handled in a court situation, where this kid can get the help he seriously needed. The footage showed SB coaxing Bella into the bathroom with a handful of food after filling the sink almost to the brim. He lunged and grabbed her by the neck, and at this point she's already struggling and clawing him. He forced her head underwater, and in the footage you can see her tail and legs flailing as she tried to escape. Somehow she got free of him, and though I expected her to run at this point, instead she tore to SB like a wild animal. As he tried to grab her and force her back into the sink, she claws his face, tore at his chest, and then raked her way down his back, all the while he's trying to get a hold of her tail. I'm stunned as he grabs a pair of trimming scissors off the shelf and runs after her with them. But I think the pain set in because he dropped the scissors and panicked for a moment, threw the scissors in the sink and ran inside, a furious black cat chasing after him. I made careful note that Bella immediately stopped attacking him once she was out of his grasp and did not touch him after he dropped the scissors and ran inside. The vet's assistant arrived, and I was as shocked as I was about the situation. She treated Bella gently and gave my cat some mild sedatives while I explained everything that happened. She was angry too, and she said she would happily support me in court with this clear evidence of abuse. Bella had swallowed a lot of water, and one of her claws had actually gone ripped out of her in a mad dash through the garage to escape SB.
Ooh, she'd be stressed and jumpy for a very long time, and I pray this would not affect her job as my therapy animal. The parents were called once everything was somewhat in order, and I didn't even give them a chance to be angry. I told them, pick up your child, I will see you in court. The court case wasn't even a challenge. With my camera footage and the testimony from the vet and the vet assistant, I won more than enough money, I'm not going to say how much, for damages, vet bills, and an extra month's paycheck so I could find a new client to work for. In addition, SB would not be allowed to have pets of any kind until he's gone through multiple different stages of therapy for its behaviour, and would be registered as an animal abuser in case future incidences happened when he became an adult. Some of you might ask why I tolerated it for so long, and mostly it was because all the times I tried to tell the parents to curb his behaviour, I was nervous about kicking up dust or causing trouble, and I couldn't afford to drop a client at the time. But after this horrible experience, I will never tolerate such behaviour again, regardless of how much I'm getting paid to deal with it. As for Bella, she was relatively unaffected by the incident and still remains her sweet and lovable self. She still enjoys having her seasonal baths and will intrude on my privacy whenever she wants. But I hope SB learnt a very big lesson. He saw Bella as nothing but prey, and I don't think he ever expected Bella to turn the tables the way she did. I also hope that SB will get his life straight and learn to be respectful to both animals and people. And next time he feels like he can treat an animal like garbage, I hope he'll remember the terrifying rage a seemingly harmless house cat unleashed on him. His parents also had to write a formal apology to me for allowing their son to behave that way, which was an order given by the judge. Reading it was very amusing, because I just knew they hated writing every single word. A couple of people asked for what the apology letter said. I don't remember the entire thing, as I have filed it away in case of need for future reference, but I can sort of remember the general gist of the letter. Now, just imagine parents probably grinding their teeth and trying to refrain from getting themselves into more trouble, and you'll hear the tone of the apology much better. Dear Miss Not Putting My Name, we apologise for our son's behaviour, and we sincerely hope Bella will recover quickly. His behaviour was by no means acceptable, nor was our lack of attempt to prevent it. We also apologise for the damages in your home and the stress this has caused you. We also recognise your tolerance of SB and are sorry you didn't speak out sooner. Such an incident could be avoided. We hope both you and your cat will recover and never have to deal with a situation like this again. Our formal apologies and best wishes, and Tyler Parents. Tyler Parents called We Need This Story. Oh my god. Oh, that is a future psychopath in training. That's a psychopath in training. Because, like, what's the number one rule with the internet is don't fuck with cats. There is a whole Netflix series that happened about trying to catch this guy that was abusing that killed cats, and then moved on to humans. I think, right? I'm not remembering correct. So yeah, I would be like, don't let that sort of thing happen to your child. Man, I used the F word 4 times in one episode. And on that note, I'm going to end the episode here. Links will be in the description to the main channel and also the second channel, where there are links on the screen to the playlist and the last episode. Go check them out. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you know when the next video comes out. Ding, ding. I'm the Mad Scientist.